Your psychiatric evaluation last Tuesday was concerning, Dr. Robert Matthews said, reading from a file folder that had my name on it. The medical team noted significant signs of dissociation, auditory hallucinations, and possible early-stage dementia. I had never been to that hospital. I had never had a psychiatric evaluation. I had never experienced hallucinations or mentioned hearing voices to anyone. And yet there was a medical file official-looking detailed, complete with clinical notes and what appeared to be my signature documenting a mental health crisis I had never experienced. But the truly terrifying part didn't become clear until I saw the photographs. My name is Elena Vasquez and I'm 41 years old, which is approximately how old I was when I discovered that my husband of 9 years had been building an elaborate scheme to have me declared mentally incompetent and steal everything I owned. The scheme was sophisticated, methodical, and would have worked if I hadn't received a phone call that made me paranoid enough to question everything. Let me start at the beginning because the beginning is where everything went wrong. I met James Whitmore 12 years ago at a hotel bar in Denver, Colorado. He was charming, well-dressed, and seemed genuinely interested in everything about me. I was a successful financial advisor. I managed portfolios, helped clients build wealth, and understood money in a way that made me valuable in corporate circles. James seemed to find that attractive. He was also successful, he said. He was in commercial real estate development. He traveled frequently. He was building an empire. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why a man who claimed to be building an empire had so much time available to pursue a relationship. I should have been suspicious when he pushed for marriage after only 8 months of dating. I should have noticed the way he tried to isolate me from my friends and family, framing it as concern about people who were taking advantage of my success. But I was in love, or I thought I was, and love makes you stupid. We got married in a small ceremony 9 years ago. I was 32, he was 47. Everyone at the wedding commented on how handsome he looked, how perfect we were together. My mother mentioned that he seemed to take a lot of photos of me. My best friend Sarah said something felt off about the way he looked at my financial documents. During the reception, I ignored all of it. The first year of marriage, James was wonderful, attentive, supportive, and increasingly interested in my career. He asked detailed questions about my clients, my investment strategies, and my projected earnings. I thought he was curious about my professional world. In retrospect, I think he was studying how to dismantle it. By year 3 of marriage, things had shifted subtly. James had convinced me to give him power of attorney over some of my financial accounts to make household management easier. He'd suggested we consolidate some of my investments for tax purposes. He'd recommended I make him a co-beneficiary on several accounts, just in case something happened to me. I'd done all of it. By year 7, I was starting to feel off. Not dramatically different, just subtly wrong. I was exhausted more than usual. I had trouble concentrating at work. I'd started second-guessing my own memory. When I'd tell James that I'd made plans with Sarah for Saturday, he'd insist that he remembered me saying I wanted to stay home. When I'd recall a conversation we'd had, he'd tell me I was misremembering. When I'd question financial decisions he'd made, he'd sigh and tell me he was concerned about my mental health. You're becoming paranoid, Elena, he said one evening, questioning everything I do. Second-guessing yourself constantly. Have you thought about seeing a therapist? I did see a therapist, a woman named Dr. Patricia Morrison who specialized in couples counseling. She saw me for 3 sessions and then told me something that terrified me. Your husband is exhibiting signs of psychological manipulation, she said gently. What you're experiencing, the constant contradiction of your own memories, the isolation from your support system, the way he frames your concerns as mental health issues, these are classic patterns of emotional abuse. That was the first time I understood that something was seriously wrong. I should have left him then, but Dr. Morrison suggested we try couples therapy first. She wanted to give him the opportunity to understand how his behavior was affecting me. I agreed, because I still believed that love could fix things if we just communicated properly. James went to exactly 1 couples therapy session and then told me he wasn't comfortable with it. He said the therapist had a bias against him. He said therapy was making me worse. He suggested I find a different therapist, one who wasn't poisoning my mind against him. I stopped seeing Drive. Morrison. What I didn't know was that James had already started his real plan. The phone call that changed everything came from my bank at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Ms. Vasquez, we need to verify a withdrawal request. A man named Marcus from First Denver Bank said, someone came in yesterday with identification claiming to be you, and they attempted to withdraw $450,000 from your personal account. We didn't process it because the ID seemed slightly off, but we wanted to verify with you directly. My hands went cold. I didn't authorize any withdrawal, I said. What did the ID say? A Colorado driver's license with your name and photo, but the photo looked staged. Professional, like a photo shoot. Not an ID photo. After I got off the phone with the bank, I called my lawyer, a woman named Sandra Wong, who'd been my friend long before she became my legal counsel. I told her about the attempted withdrawal. I told her about the impersonation. I asked her if she could help me figure out what was happening. Meet me at my office in an hour, Sandra said. And Elena, don't tell your husband about this call. At Sandra's office, I explained everything. The emotional manipulation, the financial decisions he'd made, the way he'd isolated me, the attempted impersonation at the bank. Sandra listened carefully, taking notes. And then she did something that changed everything. She Googled my name plus psychiatric hospital and mental evaluation. What came up was a medical record. It was from Denver Mental Health Associates, dated 9 days prior. It documented a psychiatric evaluation for me. Clinical notes described someone experiencing auditory hallucinations and paranoid ideation. There were recommendations for psychiatric medication. There was a detailed narrative of someone struggling with mental health issues that sounded absolutely nothing like me. This is a forgery, Sandra said quietly. This is someone impersonating you at a medical facility. My hands started shaking. How is that even possible? I asked. Don't they check ID? They do. But if the ID is good enough, and if the person is familiar with your personal information, it's possible, especially if they seem cooperative and don't seem like someone who would do this. Sandra called the hospital and pretended to be my emergency contact. She told them she was concerned that the evaluation might have been fraudulent and asked them to provide information about the person who came in. The hospital was reluctant to discuss details, but Sandra's legal pressure eventually got them to admit that there were inconsistencies between the evaluation and their standard protocols. I think your husband hired someone to impersonate you, Sandra said. I think he's building a paper trail to have you declared mentally incompetent. Once you're incompetent, he becomes your conservator. He controls everything, your finances, your medical decisions, your ability to even make a phone call without his approval. I felt like I couldn't breathe. That's insane, I said. That's not something people actually do. People absolutely do this, Sandra said. It's called financial elder fraud. Though you're not elderly. It's called conservatorship abuse. It's become disturbingly common, especially when the person doing it is married to the victim. Sandra filed a police report. She contacted the FBI. Because interstate healthcare fraud was involved, she got me access to all the medical records related to the fake evaluation, and then, over the course of the next week, she helped me gather evidence. The evidence was damning. The photo on the ID was definitely not me, but it was close enough that someone glancing at it might not notice immediately. The handwriting on the intake form was similar to mine, but not quite right to careful, like someone practicing. The personal history given during the evaluation contained details about my life, but also contained inaccuracies that would be obvious to me but might not be obvious to a doctor who didn't know me personally. But the truly incriminating thing was what Sandra found when she subpoenaed James's emails and financial records. There was a series of emails between James and a woman named Deborah Moss. The emails discussed payment for services rendered. The emails mentioned meeting with the doctor and creating the medical file and establishing a pattern of mental illness. The payment records showed that James had paid Deborah $75,000 for her participation in what was clearly a coordinated scheme. There were also older emails dating back to before James and I were married. Emails where he discussed finding a woman with significant assets and establishing financial control and creating the legal grounds for conservatorship. He had been planning this the entire time. For 12 years, he had been planning to have me declared incompetent and steal everything from me. I went to the FBI office in Denver with Sandra. I provided them with all the evidence. I explained the scheme in detail. I told them about the medical fraud, the identity impersonation, the hired collaborator, and the evidence of premeditation going back years. Special Agent Michael Torres, who specialized in financial fraud, listened carefully to everything I said. This is a sophisticated scheme, he said. But it's also one we've seen before, and it's one we can prosecute. The question is whether you want to press charges against your husband. I looked at Sandra. I thought about the years I'd spent doubting myself, thinking I was going crazy, wondering if I was remembering things correctly. I thought about the money James had stolen or redirected. I thought about what would have happened if that fake psychiatric evaluation had been more convincing, if the doctor had believed it, if I'd been declared incompetent. I want to press charges, I said. What happened over the next 18 months was a legal nightmare that revealed exactly how calculated my husband's cruelty had been. The FBI arrested James at his office on a Thursday afternoon. They also arrested Deborah Moss and the doctor who had participated in the scheme, a physician named Dr. Gerald Hoffman. who had written the false psychiatric evaluation in exchange for cash payments. Federal charges were filed: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and healthcare fraud. The conspiracy charges were particularly serious because the FBI demonstrated that this had been a long-term, premeditated scheme. James's lawyer tried to paint this as a misunderstanding. He claimed the fake evaluation was a prank that had gotten out of hand. He claimed Deborah Moss had acted on her own. He claimed Dr. Hoffman had fabricated the documents. None of it was believable once the evidence was presented. During discovery, the FBI found additional damaging information: insurance policies that James had taken out on my life, a prenuptial agreement in a drawer that he'd never shown me signed with, what appeared to be a forged version of my signature, and bank accounts in offshore locations that contained money siphoned from my investment accounts. James wasn't just trying to have me declared incompetent, he was planning to inherit everything if I died. He had systematically been moving my money to accounts he controlled. He had been preparing for the scenario where I was either incapacitated or dead. The trial lasted for months. I had to sit in a federal courthouse and watch the man I'd married present his defense. I had to listen to evidence of his betrayal. I had to hear the judge tell him that his actions constituted some of the most calculated financial fraud she'd seen in 20 years. On the bench, James was convicted on all counts. He received a sentence of 12 years in federal prison. Deborah Moss received 5 years. Dr. Hoffman received 8 years and lost his medical license permanently. The financial restitution was ordered, but again, like in so many fraud cases, the money was largely unrecoverable. James had moved most of it to places the FBI couldn't easily access. But the criminal conviction was satisfying in a way that money could never be. I filed for divorce immediately. The proceedings were straightforward since it was clear that James had committed fraud against me. The judge awarded me everything: all remaining assets, the house, the investments, everything. The divorce was finalized while James was awaiting sentencing. What happened afterward was something I didn't expect. Other women started contacting me. 3 different women reached out to me through Sandra's firm to tell me that James had been married to them before he married me. 3 other women who'd experienced similar patterns of manipulation and financial control. One of them mentioned that James had discussed putting her in a psychiatric facility temporarily to consolidate her assets. I provided their information to the FBI, and the investigation expanded. It turned out that this wasn't James's first attempt at this kind of scheme. He had successfully defrauded one of his previous wives before she discovered what was happening and left him. She had spent years rebuilding her life after losing most of her assets to him. The FBI reopened cases involving James's previous marriages. They found evidence of the same pattern repeating. He had been systematically targeting wealthy women, marrying them, and then attempting to have them declared incompetent or steal from them in other ways. He was a predator, a sophisticated, patient, intelligent predator, and I had almost become his most complete victim. 2 years after James was imprisoned, I was doing better. I'd rebuilt my investment business. I'd reconnected with my family and friends. I'd started seeing a therapist again, Dr. Patricia Morrison, the one James had driven away to process the trauma of what had happened. I'd also started speaking publicly about conservatorship abuse and spousal financial fraud. I testified in front of a state legislature about the need for stronger protections for people who might be targeted by these kinds of schemes. I worked with victim advocacy groups to help other women recognize the warning signs of financial abuse. The one thing I hadn't done was forgive James. I didn't think I ever would. What I learned from this experience was that trust needs to be earned, not assumed. I had given James access to my life because he was my husband and because I wanted to believe in the best in people. That naivety had almost cost me everything. The warning signs were there from the beginning: the way he pushed for marriage quickly, the way he discouraged my friendships, the way he insinuated himself into my financial life, the way he made me doubt my own memory and perception. I had ignored all of it because I was in love, or I thought I was. Now I understand that what I was experiencing wasn't love. It was manipulation. It was calculated predation from a man who had selected me specifically because I had assets and a successful career that he could exploit. But I survived. I didn't end up declared mentally incompetent. I didn't lose my estate. I didn't become one of the thousands of people every year who fall victim to conservatorship fraud or financial abuse by spouses. I survived because a bank employee questioned an ID that didn't quite look right. I survived because I had a friend who was a lawyer and who took my concerns seriously. I survived because I chose to believe that something was wrong, instead of accepting my husband's narrative that I was becoming paranoid and mentally unstable. James is currently serving his sentence at a federal prison in Pennsylvania. He will be 70 before he's eligible for parole. He's written me letters, dozens of them, asking for forgiveness, claiming that he was a sick man who needed help, saying that he loved me and that his crimes were a manifestation of his own trauma. I've never responded to a single one. Because forgiveness isn't something he's owed, accountability is what he's owed. And that's exactly what he got. What I want other people to understand is that this kind of fraud isn't rare. It's happening right now to women in their homes. It's happening quietly, methodically, under the guise of love and marriage. It's happening to women who are told they're overreacting, being paranoid, or mentally unwell when they raise concerns about their finances or their autonomy. If you're experiencing any of these warning signs in your relationship, please reach out. Please talk to someone. Please don't ignore the internal alarm bells the way I almost did. Because the difference between me surviving this and me spending the rest of my life in a conservatorship while James controlled my entire life was one phone call from a bank and one friend who believed me. That's a narrow margin, and I'm grateful every single day that I ended up on the right side of it.